I read 6 books in January, including Onyx Storm. Let's wrap them up. Hello, welcome to Recovering Book Snob. My name is Chloe, thank you for being here. Let's begin. The first book that I read, because this is in order, but not in terms of how much I like them in order of when I read them. The first book I read is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. It is a romantic comedy about 2 characters, Emma and Justin, and Emma and Justin are both cursed to always be the person before their ex finds the love of their life. Like, they're the person where their ex breaks up with them and then immediately after the ex finds the love of their life. Is that better explained? And they find each other through the internet. They decide, let's break the curse. I know how to break the curse. We're gonna date. And I guess our curses will sort of cancel each other out. So they decide to date just for the summer. I was not obsessed with this book. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't what I expected. I feel like the description really focuses on the romance, but for me, the romance almost felt like a subplot. I don't know whether it's because I find the predictability like a little bit of a turn off, whether I felt like everything that happened was almost not worth registering when it comes to their romance, because I was like, well, obviously that was going to happen. But I do feel like the characters' families, like each of their personalities, their own very separate emotional journeys, those were so much bigger and so much more interesting than the romance itself. And I wouldn't even say that those plots detracted from the main plot. I just think the main plot was like fine, and then the other plots were the only kind of USP interesting things about the book. I also did like how every single character was a shade of grey, like no one was clearly a baddie or a goodie. Something I didn't enjoy, and I think especially towards the end this became a little bit grating, was the therapy talk. I feel that there were loads of words that were just like zeitgeist, popular phrases, popular language that was thrown in there. I don't actually know why, because it sort of takes you out of the book, and especially when they're repeated, it just makes it feel like poor writing. So I didn't enjoy that, but the story was kind of overall charming enough, overall quite an engaging, easy read. I definitely am going to pick up more Abby Jimenez. Like, there was no zhuzh. There was no vavavoom. Misery by Stephen King. This was crazy. This was a crazy book, and it has set me on a path. As you can sort of get from the title, it's a pretty grim book. It's actually horror. Yeah, I think people would say it's horror. And it's about an author called Paul Sheldon who is in a car crash and is subsequently kidnapped by a woman called Annie. And Annie is his biggest fan. She's read all his books. She has a lot of opinions about all of his books. She is obsessed with him. There is no obsession like an Annie Wilkes obsession. And so she kind of takes him back to her house to heal. And she just holds him captive there, and she basically asks him to write a book for her specifically, and she has a lot of ideas about what she wants in the book. So the story is about her obsession and her obsession with him. It's about like readers, authors. It's a really fun like frame. It's a really fun way of talking about the author-reader relationship. I thought that was so cool. And also just the experience of writing. Again, a super interesting, strange way to talk about some of the struggles that authors experience, or not like necessarily struggles, but just like some of the, like what it means to write a book. And very, very grisly. Be warned. This book was a very random one for me to pick up because I don't like horror, or at least I thought I didn't like horror, because when I say horror, I think of films. But I read The Stand last year by Stephen King, and that's kind of apocalypse vibes, so it's like slightly different to horror, but it's definitely pretty grisly in places, and it made me realise that with enough gap between these books, I do enjoy horror. Like, I need to give myself a little bit of space between reading the book and Betty Buys, but beyond that beyond that, we're good. And I also don't like jump scares, but obviously with books, you don't tend to get jump scares in the same way. Like books, from now what I've seen, horror books are more psychological. Another reason why I was a little bit apprehensive before I read this book is because it is set in one room. Looking at the size of it, it's not a massive book, but it's like 300 pages or just under 300 pages. I wasn't sure what to expect. A book that's basically got two characters, and yeah, not only is it in one house, but it really is mostly just in one room in one house. I really wondered what you could get from it and like how engaging it could be, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I just haven't been this gripped by a book in a while. There's also so much symbolism in this story, like the typewriter, for those that read it, the typewriter, the weather, there's so many layers, and also then like the story he writes, so you do experience a bit of like book within a book. Looking into it, it does seem like this is very typical of Stephen King. He loves symbolism. This book just made me feel so excited about reading, and so like, this is why we tell stories, this is why people write books, this is why people read books, this is the whole point of it all. The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is the second of the Poppy War books. These books were written before Yellowface and before Babel. I've read both of those. It is always fun reading a lot from one author and thinking about how they've changed and maybe how they've, in my humble opinion, improved. Because I have to say that the Poppy War, I think this book I did enjoy more than the first book, but overall you can kind of tell that R.F. Kuang, especially comparing this to Babel, because they're similar genres, they're historical fantasy, you can really see how her writing has matured. The Poppy War is quite sprawling, and I feel like her characters are not quite right. The Poppy War trilogy is a historical fantasy based in mid-20th century China, and a lot of the events that happen in the books are just plucked directly from history, obviously in this like fantasy version. Our main character, Rin, is originally very poor, from a very poor province, and she's kind of plucked from obscurity and becomes this massive, terrifying warrior. And this second book immediately follows the third Poppy War, which is the end of the first book. And Rin is in a really bad place. She's committed a lot of terrible crimes, and she is also an addict. Mental health, not good. And she's also just totally fixated on killing her enemies. I mean, who isn't? But she is really, really one-track mind in a way that she was always a little bit like this in the first book, but the second book you really see her single-mindedness develop. And this is something, I have really mixed feelings about this. Her character I struggle with because of how sometimes it feels like she's quite one-dimensional, but I also think on balance, like, it's because she is genuinely really fixated, and it's because she hasn't really, like, she as a person hasn't been able to develop beyond this raw fight or flight, super impulsive, super angry person, and it kind of overshadows like everything else in her life. So I do have mixed feelings, because it's annoying when you feel like a character's one-dimensional, but maybe it's not that she's one-dimensional, you just are only ever really shown this one dimension. Like, it's an intentional reflection on how obsessive she is. So the jury's out still. Plot-wise, it's okay. I'm enjoying myself, and the pacing is solid, and we'll see how the trilogy ends. I think that's going to be a real decider. It's one of those ones where I'm going to read the third book, and if I get to the end of the third book and I'm frustrated, I'll feel like the second book deserves fewer stars, you know? Okay, thinking in bets, making smarter decisions when you don't have all the facts. This is by Annie Duke. This is non-fiction, so it's real. Is it embarrassing that I still get non-fiction and fiction confused? Like the words, I just say the wrong one. My brain can't accept that it's the way round that it is. So Annie Duke is a top poker player. I think she retired ages ago, but she still, or at least until quite recently, was ranked really, really highly in the poker. It was like first poker. Really good poker player. I know nothing about poker, so that's probably quite good context for when you watch me talk about this book. But she also has a PhD in cognitive psychology, and she's written this book about decision making in kind of business and in life. She's kind of drawn from a lot of her experiences playing poker. Her core thesis is that life is like poker, not chess, because in life you can make all of the right decisions and it can still turn out crap. Like, things can still go wrong, in the way that with chess, if you make the right decision, there just isn't as much like luck and uncertainty, whereas poker's got this magical mystery that makes it similar to life. So that was fun, that intrigued me. I also sometimes, I don't know, like, we could all do with a little help making decisions. So I was looking into this type of book, especially as a self-help cynic. I thought this might be one for me, and I wouldn't say I was disappointed. I did enjoy myself. There were some really good learnings, and I didn't get bored, but I do I don't know, just my usual self-help books sentiment shone through a little bit. The main gripe that I have, and this is the gripe I have with basically all self-help, is I find it very repetitive. I think also the book is framed as like, this is how you can make better life choices, and I didn't find it was that practical. Some of the stories I enjoyed and good one-off learnings, but I feel like it wasn't actually as applied to life as it said it would be. So that was a shame. But yeah, kind of good still. I'm not mad. If it sounds interesting to you, I'm not going to tell you not to read it. Ooh, looking at it, I think I did actually rate it 2 stars on Goodreads. But then I put a comment saying probably should be a 3, but the repetition got under my skin. Yeah, fair enough. Look how self-aware I am. White Nights by Dostoevsky. So I'm not in the centre of the screen. It's probably a bit late for me to rectify this, but here you go. This is a novella, so a little baby book, a little baby novel. And it's about a man we actually never learn the name of. And this narrator meets a woman on a bridge at night, and they get chatting. They both separately have their own love troubles to tell each other about. The story is kind of just about loneliness and longing, and that big challenge to find intimacy and belonging, happiness, etc. The usual stuff. But it was just a beautiful little book. It's one of those books that really gets under your skin. You're reading it and you just don't even feel like that actively moved by it, but then towards the end and as you finish it, you're like, ooh, chills, you know? Our main character, Mr. Bloke, is also, he's kind of quite likeable, surprisingly likeable, and I think it's because he's so vulnerable. I read Crime and Punishment, that was my major Dostoevsky, and it was really fun to go from that to reading a very short book about love by him, because you could see it was the same author, but also it's just like very different, or quite different. Similar themes sort of, but like different foci. Okay guys, saving the clickbait until last, I read Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is, for those who don't know, it is the 3rd book in a romantasy series that is set, you know what? I don't really understand what era it's set in. Let's see, let's Google. What does Google say? It doesn't actually say. No, it doesn't. I cannot find this answer. Is there like an embargo on this information or something? Anyway, it's kind of in this timeless void, but there are dragons and dragon riders. And the first book, we see Violet, our main character, arrive at this big scary war college. They live in this quite brutal world where kids just like go to this war college to become dragon riders, and a lot of them die, and death starts to be seen in a really, you know, it's just like a fact of life kind of way. But obviously you do have this romantasy element, so Violet's love interest, Xaden, is this scary bad boy dragon rider. I guess this series is a bit of an enemies to lovers series, and in this third book they're still lovers but things are tense. There are a lot of battles in this series, a lot of love, a lot of spice, as the kids say, tension and friendship. I honestly think the friendships are my favourite thing about this series. Some of the characters that Violet is friends with, I find Violet and Xaden alright. I mean, they actually don't annoy me, really. But I think it's because I don't really care that much anymore about them, about their romance. I've kind of lost interest as the series has gone on, but thankfully these books, like, they are just chock full of other things that are going on other than the romance. The battle sequences and the kind of multiple points of view were really cool and really, really fun to read. And you also had loads of little tiny moments, lots of Easter eggs, so many characters as well, to the point where it was a little bit confusing. A lot of plot lines, a lot of moments where you were like, I meant to remember this moment. Am I gonna have to reread this by the time the next one comes out? Probably, because I can barely remember a lot of the details now, and I read it 3 weeks ago, so not ideal. I am a little bit worried that Rebecca Yarros has lost the plot if she doesn't refine that plot by the time we get to the next book, which I believe is meant to be the last in the series. Well, kind of similar feelings to what I was saying about Poppy War. With these series where I feel like fantasy is that the books are so thick and there are so many characters, there's so much lore, there's so much mystery, and especially when there's magic and all that stuff, like, who knows what could happen. That's what's fun about these genres, is the possibilities are limitless, but I guess you also end up, that's a huge challenge for authors, like, are they gonna, you know, bite off more than they can chew and introduce too many people, too many things, too many magic moments. Anyway, enough from me. Those are all my thoughts. I have no thoughts left. It's, sorry about the fit, by the way, it's because I have to go for a run after this, and I just know if I don't wear the outfit, especially I've now recorded myself in the running outfit, so if I don't actually go for a run, it'll be very embarrassing. Okay, thanks for joining me. As per usual, let me know what you think of the books in the comments, if you've read them. And I hope you had a good week. I hope overall your year has started well. My Jan was quite miserable, actually. Thanks for being here. Thank you for watching. It looks like I'm about to hug you. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.